Hi, I'm Don from DonDronesOn. If you're planning on flying a drone or RC aircraft over 250 grams in Canada, and your flights may be near airports or fairly close to people, you will very likely want to get your remotely piloted aircraft Advanced Operations Pilot Certificate. Watch this video to understand the details and get yourself all set for the exam. In Canada, drones such as quadcopters as well as RC aircraft are collectively called remotely piloted aircraft, or RPAs. For simplicity, I'll generally refer to RPAs as drones. The Transport Canada regulations for flying RPAs have been revised in 2025. This video and the accompanying PDF study guide aligns with the new regulations, and I'll highlight the changes for advanced operations as we go through the material. Let's start by understanding how the regulations are structured. The regulatory framework is designed to address several tiers of risk. The riskier the operation, the more regulations and restrictions that apply. At the bottom of the heap, drones under 250 grams are considered very low risk and so have very few rules. Basic drone operations are those that remain within visual line of sight of the pilot, stay clear of people and aerodromes, and where the drone is less than 25 kilograms. Advanced operations are for flights a bit closer to people and aerodromes, in controlled airspace, and for potentially larger drones, up to 150 kilograms. More regulations apply, but you can fly in more places. Finally, there are regulations for flying beyond visual line of sight and for even more complex and riskier flights. Aligned with these tiers of operations are 3 levels of pilot certification: basic, advanced, and level 1 complex. You don't need a pilot certificate to fly drones under 250 grams. And for operations that fall outside the risk parameters for any of these tiers, you can always apply for a Special Flight Operations Certificate, or SFOC. Now, while some people think these regulations are overly restrictive, another way to consider it is that you can actually fly a drone anywhere in Canada as long as you have the right level of certification and authorization. I'll also mention at this point that it doesn't matter whether you intend to fly recreationally or for money. In Canada, pilot certification levels are not related to whether or not you want to fly commercially, unlike in the US. The main risk parameters that Transport Canada focuses on are listed across the top of this chart. The weight of the drone, how close to bystanders you're flying near crowds of people, proximity to manned aircraft operations, and whether or not you can see your drone. Pilots with their advanced certification can fly either small drones, those from 250 grams to 25 kilograms, or what they call medium drones, up to 150 kilograms. There are additional regulations and restrictions when flying larger medium drones. With a small drone, you can generally fly within 5 meters or 15 feet of a bystander, somebody who's not involved with the operation. Although if your drone is equipped with an approved parachute system, you can fly even closer. Medium drones must be kept 30 meters or 100 feet back from bystanders. Drones must be approved for flying near people like this, and Transport Canada maintains a list of approved makes and models. I'll leave a link in the description below to that approved drone list. You'll need an SFOC to fly at advertised events, which are things like sporting events or concerts. Pilots with their advanced certification can also fly within 5.6 kilometers or 3 nautical miles of a certified airport, or within 1.9 kilometers or 1 nautical mile of a certified heliport. When doing so, you should contact the aerodrome in advance to ensure your operation doesn't interfere with manned aircraft. You can also fly within controlled airspace with your advanced certification after you receive authorization via the NavDrone app. And this is important because huge areas around major airports are controlled airspace from the ground up, even if you're trying to fly in your own backyard. Advanced pilots normally must keep their drones within visual line of sight, or VLOS, but starting in November 2025, 2 new privileges will be available to advanced pilots: sheltered operations, and extended VLOS. And I'll get into these in a minute or two. So before we move on, let me summarize. Your operation is considered advanced if any of the following apply. If you have bystanders within 30 meters or 100 feet of your drone, if you're flying within 5.6 kilometers of a certified airport or within 1.9 kilometers of a certified heliport, or if you are anywhere within controlled airspace. To fly an advanced operation, the pilot must pass an online exam and an in-person flight review and must meet recency requirements every 2 years. The drone itself must be on the Transport Canada approved list for the type of operation, whether it is in controlled airspace, near bystanders, which is defined as between 5 meters and 30 meters of people, or over people, which is less than 5 meters away from bystanders, measured horizontally. There are higher standoff distances for medium-sized drones. Regardless of which pilot certificate you're striving for, they all start with an exam. The exams are online and open book, meaning you can have resource material open and can even use Google or AI tools to search for answers. Now, this would be a good place to mention that I do sell the slide decks for this study guide video as well as other study guides. These guides, in the form of PDFs, are very comprehensive and include links to other reference material. They also have links to dozens of videos I have produced to help drone pilots understand topics like VFR charts, the theory of flight, and stuff like site surveys. The Advanced Study Guide package includes slides from 9 of my other videos, a total of over 250 pages of information. You can have it open while you do your exam and easily search for stuff you can never remember, like which control surface affects longitudinal stability. There are links to my free training portfolio and these study guides in the description below this video. Okay, back to the story. While the exam is open book, you do need to complete it on your own without help from anyone else. If you have a disability of some sort, just contact Transport Canada to discuss accommodations that can be made. The exams are available in English or French and are multiple choice with 4 possible answers to each question. Most questions are text only, but some include diagrams. There's no penalty for wrong answers, so feel free to guess if you're totally stumped. You can't copy, video, or remove any portion of the exams, but you can keep notes of topics or terms you need to better understand. By the way, I have a few videos on my channel actually showing me taking the exams, but I've been careful to not show the questions and just paraphrase the topics. You might be interested in watching one of those to get a feel for the experience. When you submit your answers at the end of the exam, you will immediately get your results, whether you passed or failed. Unfortunately, the feedback you receive on wrong answers is limited to broad knowledge areas, not specifics, which can make it challenging to learn from your mistakes. And that's unfortunate because the advanced exam is really tough, so you may need to do it several times before you succeed. You can take the exam as many times as you need to, but you have to wait 24 hours between sessions and pay the fee each time. You don't need to have your basic certificate to try for the advanced, but most people do get their basic first. That way you can at least still fly your drone while you're working on your advanced certification. For the advanced exam, there are 50 questions with an 80% pass rate. You have 60 minutes to complete the exam, and there's a $10 fee. You need to be at least 16 years old to hold an advanced drone pilot certificate. Once you've passed the exam, you'll also need to pass an in-person flight review before you are considered an advanced drone pilot. Most people consider the flight review part a breeze compared to passing this exam. I have other videos about what to expect in a flight review, so check those out. Incidentally, if you have any questions about this whole process, don't hesitate to reach out to me at DonDronesOn@gmail.com. Or better yet, join the Drone Pilot Association of Canada. It's free and offers great resources as well as a Facebook community of thousands of drone pilots who are happy to help others just like you. You're not alone. Okay, let's get into what you need to know to succeed at the advanced exam. Your 50 exam questions will be randomly drawn from a large pool of questions that Transport Canada has come up with, but will always fall within these 8 knowledge areas with the distribution of questions shown here. Compared to the basic exam, it's the same number of regulatory questions, but more questions in the other 7 categories. And generally the questions are more difficult. So with less time to complete more questions with a higher required pass rate, this is a much tougher challenge than the basic exam. And just like the basic exam, many of the questions appear to have little or nothing to do with flying a quadcopter drone. Many of the questions stem from manned aviation, fixed-wing RC aircraft topics, and aviation documents you may never have heard of or never need to consult. You could be asked about what the cyclic control does on a helicopter, and you'll be expected to know, or at least be able to look up, weird, obscure weather terminology that can easily rattle you if you're not prepared. So let's walk through the 8 knowledge areas to get you ready. All right, let's start with the first and largest knowledge area, air law, air traffic rules and procedures, basically the regulations. You can expect 14 questions from this area, and they are likely going to throw a lot of terms at you in the questions. So you need to be aware of at least the most common ones, which we'll go through in a moment. You should know Part 9 of the Canadian Aviation Regulations, the CARS, the drone section, inside out. I'll go through the fundamental rules in this video, but you really should watch my 37-minute Don's Guide to the 2025 RPAS Regulations video as well, where I interpret each rule in plain language. Finally, you should thoroughly understand the various classifications of airspace and aerodromes. That's crucial. Okay, I've got 5 pages of terms you should know. I'll speak to the important ones, but feel free to pause the video to read them all or purchase the downloadable PDF of these slides and follow along with those, taking notes as you go. It is surprisingly important to know the formal definition of an RPA as written here. You could be asked for that definition or ask a question related to part of it. While an RPA is the aircraft itself, including any payload that is on board, like a camera, an RPAS is the whole system, including the controller. And they often ask questions about a small RPA. So you need to know that a small RPA is one that is between 250 grams and 25 kilograms. That weight, by the way, includes the camera, accessories like prop guards, and perhaps fuel in the case of an RC aircraft. The next set of terms relates to people, and the most important one here is bystander. Several key rules refer to bystanders, people who are not involved in your drone operation and who have not accepted the risk of being close to the drone. Someone walking their dog nearby is a classic case of a bystander. Generally, you need to keep your drone away from bystanders, but if you inform them of the presence of the drone and they accept the potential risk, you are permitted to fly near them. For example, you can say, "Hey, let's get a drone shot of us," to a group of friends, and you can pop a drone up for a selfie fairly close to the group, as long as you're not reckless. And of course, anyone who is directly involved in the operation, like a spotter, for example, is also exempt from any bystander stay-back rules. You can fly right over them. Folks like that are called crew. A special case of bystanders is called an advertised event. An advertised event is formally defined as an outdoor event that is advertised to the general public, including a concert, festival, market, or sporting event. Transport Canada has additionally clarified that school sporting events, things advertised on Facebook, and amusement parks like Canada's Wonderland are considered advertised events. You'll need to apply for a special flight operations certificate to fly at an advertised event. Visual line of sight is an important notion, with some interesting nuances for the higher drone licenses. Under most circumstances, you need to be able to see your drone with your unaided eyes. Well, glasses or contact lenses are permitted, but if you can only see your drone with binoculars or via your controller or phone, you don't have it in VLOS. You need to be able to know where it is, see it well enough to control it, and be able to see incoming aircraft or hazards like towers or whatever in the area you're flying. The 2025 RPAS rules permit two minor exceptions to VLOS operations for advanced pilots: extended VLOS and sheltered operations. Extended VLOS means you can fly out of visual line of sight if you have a spotter who can see the airspace where the drone is flying, sufficient to detect conflicting aircraft or other hazards. The spotter needs at least their basic drone license. You can fly the drone up to 3.7 kilometers away, but you must stay 30 meters away from bystanders. Sheltered operations is a bit different. This rule allows you to fly on the far side of buildings without a spotter, as long as you stay tucked in fairly close to the building. The only major catch is that, again, you must stay 30 meters away from bystanders. Aerodromes. Understanding aerodrome classification is crucial for understanding the drone rules. Aerodrome is the generic term for anywhere an aircraft lands or takes off. An airport is obviously an aerodrome, but so is a grocery store parking lot if an emergency helicopter is landing there, or a lake if there's a seaplane taking off. The more important permanent aerodromes are catalogued in a NAV Canada document called the CFS, or Canada Flight Supplement. There are actually 7 of these covering various regions. And then there's another document called the Canada Water Aerodrome Supplement for seaplane bases. In these listings, each aerodrome is classified as either registered, certified, or military. The terms airport or heliport are used only for certified aerodromes. The rules for each of these classifications are different, and we'll get to those in a second or two. Next, we need to understand some terms associated with airspace. Domestic airspace is all outdoor space above the ground within Canadian borders. Fun fact, all of these drone regulations apply only outside of buildings and above the surface. They don't apply indoors or underground. Class G airspace is any airspace that is not Class A through F, and is generally the wide open spaces that are best for drone flying. Controlled airspace is found around major airports managed by a control tower. These can be Class A, B, C, D, or E. It really doesn't matter which class because the rules for drones are all the same. If you live in a major city like Toronto or Edmonton, most of the city will be covered in a control zone from the ground up. Advanced pilots are permitted to fly in controlled airspace by using the NavDrone app to request authorization to fly in a specific area for a given time frame. Class F restricted airspace is designated around places like Parliament Hill, Niagara Falls, major prisons, and military testing areas. RPAS restricted airspace are additional no-fly zones for drones only, unless, of course, you get permission from the user or controlling agency. NOTAM no-fly zones are temporary and are very important to know about because they can pop up anywhere due to a special event like an air show, a major sporting event, an emergency situation like a wildfire, or even a special police operation. Yeah, I know, that's a lot of terms to remember, and I have a couple of more pages in the study guide PDF, including a handy list of acronyms. So with these terms in mind, let's go through the fundamental drone rules you should absolutely know, both for the exam and of course when you are actually flying. There are a few basic safety regulations that apply to all drones, including drones under 250 grams, like the DJI Mini 4 Pro. The most important one is what I call the don't do anything stupid rule. It basically says you cannot fly recklessly, endangering manned aircraft or people on the ground. You also need to stay out of emergency areas, such as a perimeter set up around a major accident. 9.3 kilometers, that's 5 nautical miles, away from wildfires. And you have to stay out of temporary no-fly zones, the ones set up with NOTAMs. Drone registration rules are easy. All drones over 250 grams must be registered and have the registration number on them in an easily visible place. You need to be a Canadian citizen or permanent resident to register a drone. Foreign visitors need to get an approved SFOC, unless they're flying a microdrone. To fly a drone over 250 grams, you need to have a pilot certificate and carry it with you when you're flying. You need to be fit to fly, including having no alcohol within 12 hours of your flight. To keep your pilot certification valid, you need to complete what is called a recency activity every 2 years. Basic and advanced drone pilots must keep their drone within visual line of sight, or VLOS, either within sight of the pilot or a trained visual observer. Advanced pilots can also perform the new sheltered operation and extended VLOS things I described earlier. By the way, neither pilots nor spotters can operate a vehicle or boat when doing their job. Flying a drone using FPV goggles, which are considered to reduce situational awareness, is permitted only if you have a spotter helping you. Flying at night is okay as long as you have visible lights on your drone. Proximity to people gets tricky, but it is one major reason getting your advanced license is worth it. Basic pilots must stay 30 meters or 100 feet away from bystanders, measured horizontally. Advanced drone pilots can fly closer, depending upon their drone's Safety Assurance Declaration. Transport Canada has a list of these approved drones on their drone safety website. Most DJI drones, for example, are approved for flying up to 5 meters or 15 feet away from bystanders. If your drone is equipped with an approved parachute system, you can fly within 5 meters of people, which is called flying over them. Advanced pilots can also fly medium drones between 25 and 150 kilograms, but need to stay farther away from bystanders. But to fly any size drone at an advertised event, where there may be crowds of bystanders, requires that good old SFOC. Now let's talk about proximity to manned aircraft and aerodromes, and this is where all those definitions will come in handy. First of all pilots of any size drone must stay away from manned aircraft. And if you happen to encounter a manned aircraft, the drone is the one that must get out of the way or yield to that manned aircraft. Always. And regardless of your pilot license level, you must have appropriate authorization to fly any drone in Class F restricted airspace, RPAS restricted airspace, or in a no-fly zone established via a NOTAM. Basic pilots are quite restricted around aerodromes, but advanced pilots have more freedom. You must fly with caution and stay out of flight paths when near registered aerodromes, those with reg in the operator section of their CFS or WAS listing. If you're within 5.6 kilometers of a certified airport or within 1.9 kilometers of a certified heliport, you are required to follow that aerodrome's procedures, which means you should contact the operator of the aerodrome, tell them about your planned flight, and coordinate it with them. They can't refuse to allow you to fly, but you must be reasonable and fly safely. Transport Canada also recommends you listen in on the airport's aviation frequency for additional situational awareness. If you want to fly within 5.6 kilometers of a military aerodrome, you need to receive authorization from the Department of National Defense. And finally, you must receive NavDrone authorization to fly in controlled airspace. Here's a handy table that may make all these rules easier to remember. I also recommend you watch my Airspace, Airports, and Aerodromes video. It's in my free training roadmap. That video explains this stuff in much more detail, with examples, and the slides from that video are included in my Advanced Study Guide PDF. I should mention that while you may get exam questions related to these distances and keep-out zones, in practice, it's just too hard to figure it all out manually. When the drone rules came out in 2019, I worked with a very talented developer to come up with Drone Pilot Canada, an app that makes it easy to know if you're in any of these no-fly zones and what you need to do to get authorization. There's also a website called the NRC Drone Site Selection Tool that helps, and the unfortunately difficult to use NavDrone app. You do need to use the NavDrone app or website for controlled airspace authorization. That's the only place you can do it. Okay, one last page about regulations. Drones over 250 grams must remain below 122 meters or 400 feet as measured above ground level. The one exception is if you are flying close to a very large structure, say the CN Tower or a tall building. You can fly 30 meters over the top of it. Finally, there are a few operational rules you need to follow. Before any flight, you must perform what is called a site survey, checking airspace-related issues, ground hazards, weather suitability, and potential proximity to bystanders. I have a video that explains this. You're expected to have and use checklists and procedures during your operation, including pre-flight checks, takeoff and landing procedures, and emergency procedures. You need to keep a log of all your flights and a maintenance log of any repairs or upgrades you've done to your drone. Again, the Drone Pilot Canada app helps you with all of these operational requirements. Okay, that was knowledge area number 1 of 8. If you already have your basic pilot certification, these regulatory questions shouldn't be too tough to master for the advanced exam. And don't forget, it is an open book exam. Knowledge area number 2 is RPAS airframes, power plants, propulsion, and systems. Essentially the physical stuff that makes your drone or RC aircraft stay in the air. You can expect 5 questions from this area, but they can be doozies. For example, you need to know all sorts of peculiar bits and pieces of aircraft. My favorites are exam questions related to trim tabs or the helicopter collective control. One of my theory of flight videos covers all of this in detail. You'll also be expected to know about environmental factors that can affect equipment, how batteries behave, different types of motors such as brushless motors, and various components like a compass, IMU, or servos. I recommend you watch my How Drones Work video. Just to make it fun, I guess, you might see questions on the advanced exam about how you should adjust your pressure altimeter when flying between airports and various intricacies related to pitot tube calibration. Very unlikely that you'll need to know this for your quadcopter, but just be aware that the Ames Airmanship section has some information about this, or you can just Google it if you're in a pinch. I've also seen some weird questions about GPS accuracy on the advanced exams. I say this as weird because some of the capabilities they're testing you on depend so much on your actual drone, and with the technology advancing so quickly, questions can become outdated. So if you encounter a question like this, read through it carefully, eliminate the obviously wrong answers, then choose an answer that seems to be the most safety-oriented. Knowledge area 3 is human factors, and some of these questions can be surprisingly challenging. Now, one easy topic that seems to come up a lot on the exams is related to being fit to fly. You'll need to remember that the rule is no alcohol 12 hours prior to flying a drone. I know, that's way more strict than driving a car, but that's the rule. And they also say 28 days for cannabis use. Other than fitness to fly, there's a broad range of topics they like to ask you about in the human factors area. I recommend you watch my human factors video for information about scanning techniques, perspective illusion, decision-making, team dynamics, good communications, best practices for running through checklists, and many other tidbits that are not necessarily obvious or even easy to Google. You may encounter questions about, say, working in a team, where the right answer may not be black and white, but more dependent upon the situation. Don't get rattled, just eliminate the wrong answer choices and pick the most safety-oriented answer from the choices that remain. Knowledge area 4 is meteorology, or weather. The main rule here is that you are not legally allowed to fly outside of the specs for your drone, which usually boils down to temperature and wind resistance. The exam could ask you fairly simple questions related to the names of cloud formations, or esoteric weather questions about rime ice or steam fog. If you don't know these, a quick Google search will usually help you. My weather video is a great resource for drone-related weather information. Compared to the basic exam, you'll probably see more complex weather questions on the advanced. Things like understanding turbulence from airflow around mountains, weather fronts, and things like that. You could also see questions about aviation weather services like METARs, which are current weather conditions, as opposed to TAFs, which are forecasts. You may also encounter questions about flight services, such as flight information centers or air traffic services. And I've even seen a question about who offers these services, which is generally NAV Canada. That question came across more like a job posting than anything a drone operator needed to know. But again, don't get rattled, just answer the question. Knowledge Area 5 is navigation, and you should expect 5 questions in this area. For sure, you could be asked about how far away you must stay from various types of aerodromes, as we discussed earlier. They can also ask you questions related to aviation maps, such as VFR charts, things like latitude and longitude, or being able to understand different symbols shown on the charts. For example, they could ask if a particular spot on a map is Class C or E airspace, based upon the kind of dashed line shown, or be able to distinguish between a soaring zone for gliders versus an area for aviation training. I have 3 pages of legends in my study guide PDF to help you sort out the symbols and annotations on maps, and my VFR charts for drone pilots video is a great resource as well. Another topic they like to ask you about is interpreting CFS listings. They could show you a listing for an aerodrome and ask things like the ICAO code for an airport, knowing if it is registered or certified, who to call to coordinate a flight, and an aerodrome's elevation above sea level. The airport sketch on CFS listings show the runway numbers, which you should be able to interpret. I have a video called How to Read CFS Charts that will help you with all of that. Because a lot of aviation information uses UTC time, also known as either Coordinated Universal Time, Zulu Time, or Greenwich Mean Time, you should be familiar with how to convert from UTC to a local time zone. The main thing to remember is that UTC time is based upon the Greenwich Meridian, which runs through London, England. So all UTC times are earlier than time zones in Canada. If a time reference is 1100 UTC, for example, then you would subtract 4 hours to get 7 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time. Knowledge Area 6 is flight operations. And because advanced pilots could operate in a wide variety of scenarios, there are 7 questions in this area. Again, you'll need to know about how to operate around aerodrome types, including recognizing that manned aircraft typically do left-hand circuits around an airfield before landing. You'll need to know about runway numbering and possibly basic information about NOTAMs. NOTAMs are notices to airmen, online warnings about temporary changes or restrictions. Everything from broken runway lights to tower cranes to no-fly zones around football games. You may also need to know that drone pilots need checklists and procedures, and the questions in this area may also ask about what records you're expected to keep, namely flight logs and maintenance records. You might also be asked when you're required to report incidents and accidents. Most minor incidents, such as crashing into a tree or even unintentionally hitting someone, do not need to be reported, but you're expected to keep a record of what happened and ensure corrective actions have taken place before resuming a flight. More serious accidents must be reported to the Transportation Safety Board, but only if your drone is over 25 kilograms, if someone is killed or seriously injured, or if you have hit a manned aircraft. A report of a serious accident like this must be reported as soon as possible, but there's no prescribed time limit. I've recently seen questions about bird strikes on exams. Okay, bird strikes on drones, but I've seen the questions on the exams. Sorry. There's a document called TP13549 that seems to indicate that drone pilots, like all aircraft pilots, are expected to report bird strikes to Transport Canada. Strangely, the AIM document makes no mention of this, at least at the moment. Knowledge Area 7 is the theory of flight and can be challenging because it can be quite technical. You'll see 4 questions related to the theory of flight on the advanced exam. Fortunately, I have a 3-part video series that covers a huge amount of information you may be asked about. This includes explaining lift, drag, yaw, pitch, roll, and airfoil terminology. One controversial area to understand is Bernoulli's principle. It's controversial because a lot of people think it is the principle behind lift, but it isn't. Watch my video to understand. And you are almost certainly going to see a question related to the concept of density altitude, which relates to how aircraft operate in different air conditions: temperature, altitude, pressure, and humidity. The thing to remember is that the best performance is in colder air, near sea level, with high barometric pressure and low humidity. I'm sure there are entire courses about all this in flight schools, and in the meantime, your drone will fly just fine in any of these. The final knowledge area is radio telephony. Again, there can be some technically difficult questions in this area, but if you watch my 3-part video series on radio knowledge, you should be well prepared. That series covers the theoretical elements of radio transmission, when to use an aviation radio, and the etiquette expected on the radio. Drone pilots, at least right now in 2025, are not permitted to transmit or talk on an aviation radio, even with their ROC A certification. It's complicated. That said, it is a best practice to listen on aviation frequencies to help you be aware of manned aircraft in the area or about to arrive. So you should know about how radio conversations are held and some of the terminologies used. At the very least, have the phonetic alphabet close at hand in case that's part of a question. And there may be some questions about your C2 or command and control linkage, the radio link between your control unit and the drone, and what can cause interference with that linkage. Okay, that was a lot of information to pack into your brain. Let's close this off with some tips to help you ace the exam. First of all, in case I didn't mention it, watch all my videos listed in my free downloadable training roadmap. There's a link in the description below. And read the RPA chapter of the AIM document. It's only around 30 pages and really well written. When you are ready to do the exam, find a spot where you won't be interrupted for the full hour it will take. And use a PC or tablet. Don't even think about trying this on your phone. Even on a PC, some of the diagrams and maps are very tiny. Have your reference documents, like the AIM, open so you can immediately search for terms or obscure items. Use Control F to search in a PDF document. Watch your time and just move on if you get stuck. But be sure to answer every question, since there's no penalty for wrong answers. I recommend you have a sheet of paper handy to keep 3 lists. The first list is the question numbers for questions you are totally baffled by. These should be your first priority for going back and reviewing if you have time. The second list are questions you think you got right, but may not be 100% confident about. Again, you can go back and review these ones later. Finally, keeping a running list of terms or acronyms you didn't know. This will help you to learn from your mistakes and also identify your knowledge gaps if you don't pass. Finally, envision success. You can do it. Be sure to let me know how you did in the comments below the video after you pass. Safe and happy flying.